Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of the Anomaly Detected podcast, where I talk about all things UFO and aerial phenomenon related. And I learned after the last episode not to reject my kitty cat's love, because otherwise she is going to claw my leg trying to get up here. So you guys are just going to have to get used to Mrs. Scully being up here hanging out with me, because she's a good lap cat. The reason why I am doing this episode, the topic that we're going to be covering is alien abductions. Now, I know that a lot of people are skeptical about whether or not this happens, but and for a long time, I thought that it wasn't really something that happened. I always thought it was kind of outlandish back in the day. I mean, up until about 5 or so years ago, I used to think it was probably kind of unlikely. But after giving it more thought, I started thinking that it is more likely, or that it is possible. How there are a few different instances that I can think of that I thought were pretty compelling. Like, let's say there was a movie that came out back in the 90s, and it was called Fire in the Sky. And it was a movie that came out about a fella named Travis Walton, and it involved a group of loggers who were out working in the forest at one point back in the 70s, I want to say. And they saw something in the forest. They saw a alien craft supposedly out there, and Travis Walton supposedly got out of the truck and went up to it, and the thing ended up taking him. And there was this whole ordeal. If you haven't seen that movie, I watched it probably about 2 years ago or so, and I hadn't seen it since I was a child. I think I saw it when I was maybe 9 or 10 years old, and it had an impact on me back then, and I think it's still held up even all these years later, be it 30 years ago that this movie came out or so. And what happened, the part of the movie that really got me was not necessarily that the guy was abducted, but when he had the flashbacks. I don't want to ruin this movie for you if you haven't seen it yet, but I do recommend it. But the thing that really made me scratch my head and be like, whoa, was how when he had a flashback about when he was on the ship, there were belongings and stuff that were floating around in space that belonged to other abductees. So there were shoes, children's shoes, floating across the screen, and people's eyeglasses. And there were these people who had been on the ship for, could be decades or whatever, and they're all in these entombed, enclosed spaces. And as he's floating around, unable to catch his grip or anything, he ends up floating across the screen and lands on, goes through this, I want to say thin membrane, and puts his arm right through another person who had also been on this ship, an abductee. And I mean, obviously, that right there was film. Okay, that was Hollywood. But it really got my mind jogging. And I think that it's completely possible. Now, the reason why I used to think that it was kind of outlandish was because a lot of the interviews that I had heard from other people were they just kind of seemed outlandish. Like somebody would be like, "Yeah, I was abducted, but I wasn't afraid at all, and I felt warmth and love and light and all this stuff and it sounded way too hippie-ish for me. Like I was like that doesn't sound like the way that a normal human would react. I mean, unless you were in, I guess, a situation where something is actively like using some kind of hypnosis or something on you to kind of make you be calm. Kind of like, let's say, like if you were, I'm just throwing this out there, but let's say like a fly or something lands in a Venus flytrap or something, and maybe the thing will send out chemicals or something to the fly, being like, don't struggle. Everything will be fine soon. Everything is all right. Just relax and sleep. Or something like that. I mean, it could be something like that, but I just don't see how a normal person in a situation like that wouldn't be scared to death. And so I don't know. I might be getting off topic here, but I do think that people get abducted, and I've been saying it for a while that it's likely that because there's people who go missing all over the country. Now, the most obvious thing would be people being nasty to each other, like actual like human on human abduction or runaway or some kind of something like that. But I do believe that there is some percentage of missing persons who were abducted by aliens. And that there is a fella that I think that you guys should look into, who I have been listening to some of his podcasts for a while, and his name is David Paulides. It's Paulides, and he was a detective, and he did it, and he does lots of investigations where the normal boxes that investigators check off, like, is this person a runaway, mental health issues, things like that, that once those are all checked off, and it's really an unusual case where the dogs can't find anything related to these people who are missing. They lose the scent immediately. Like, they'll bring these dogs to the exact same spot where the missing person last was seen, and they'll put a dog out there, and the cadaver dogs and or just scent dogs can't pick up anything on their in their noses. So I think that David Paulides, he does something called Missing 411. I think that those are worth checking out because he comes at it from a very logical perspective, and he tries not to just come right out and say like alien or anything like that, but sometimes when things just are so bizarre, then sometimes you really just, there's no other explanation, I think. And like, let's say for instance, you and I are out in on a hunting trip. let's just say, for instance, we're hunters, okay, and we've been hunting the same forest area for the last 20 years. We're best friends, and we've been out there, and let's just say, for instance, you look down and you say, "Hey, hold on a second. I'm gonna grab something out of my backpack and get a protein bar or something." You reach down and look into your backpack, and you look up, and I'm completely gone. And you're like, "Mike, hello? Where'd he go?" There was no sound. There was nothing to indicate a struggle or how I just vanished. It's just, I'm gone. And there have been times where stuff like that has happened, where a family will be walking and the wife's got to go use the bathroom or something, or they'll leave somebody over here and just outside of view, and for just a few seconds, and they come back and the person's gone. Like that was what I was trying to get at, that it's just so bizarre that there's no explanation. And that's after they've ruled out any kind of foul play or anything. And oftentimes this is happening for whatever reason in national parks. And the one that they talk about the most is in Yosemite National Park out there in California. But these are happening in national parks all over the country, and in some cases all over the world. But this David Paulides guy, he particularly, I believe he mostly just focuses on the United States and in Canada. So, it's just a thing. And once you know that aliens exist, like I do, right? Then there are just so many different possibilities. Like, are there portals or like what's going on? Because as far as I can tell, these aliens have technologies that far surpass our own technologies. So one of the things that I did want to mention in this episode was a particular story that I'll have to paraphrase. I tried to look it up. I tried to find it. I believe it was in a documentary that I watched. It was either on Amazon Prime or on Netflix. It might have even just been a YouTube documentary that I watched. It was long enough ago that I can't quite remember. But this happened back supposedly in the 1970s or 1980s. And there were several men who were out on a camping trip. And I can't recall exactly what happened to this guy's friends, or if he was abducted and his friends weren't, or vice versa. I really can't remember some of the specifics, but they were out on this camping trip, and the guy, they had set up their tents and stuff, and they were in some kind of area where they weren't really supposed to be. And I can't remember what state it was or whatever, but they were in some area where they were technically not supposed to be. Like, there was signage or something, from what I can recall, saying like this is a no camping zone or whatever, but they ignored it and they went and basically set camp on a cliffside. And you might have seen and or heard of those triangular UFOs. They're, like perfect triangle, and they have lights, like several lights down around the triangle, and then a circular, a wider circular one in the middle. And supposedly, sometime in the night, this thing came up and hovered above them somewhere near the cliffside and shined a light on them, and it actually caused burns on their skin. And then the fella who I can't remember his name, said that the next thing he knew, he was on board this alien craft. And his recollection of it was that it wasn't just him on the ship, that it was him alongside several other people on this ship, that it was him and possibly even a dozen or more other people who were all on board, and they were somehow psychically paralyzed or something, where they were standing there and they were all naked and they had their clothes held out in front of them like this. I can't remember if he said they were folded or not, but they were holding clothes in front of them and they were all naked and they could not move, they couldn't speak, and all they could do was murmur or cry or whimper, and the only thing that they could really move was their eyes. And so, and then there were these, what he said were these gray aliens with the big eyes, the typical ones that you normally hear about when people talk about having seen them. And basically, the aliens were the bosses. The aliens were running the show. But the thing that did catch my attention was that he said that there were humans on board this ship too, who were in like flight jumpsuits, like you would see the crews on like an aircraft, on an Air Force jet or something like that one-piece jumpsuit that has a zipper that comes up. And but those guys, they, from what he said that they were not making any eye contact. They basically were doing their job and keeping their heads down, and I suppose were ordered not to interfere no matter whatever's going on. So, and the way that this guy looked and sounded in this interview that I saw, he looked like he was really afraid. There's just things, and there were things that he said that were just really convincing. And he was talking about the amount of fear that he had and how long it stuck with him afterward. And at some point, he was placed back down where he was abducted from. If I remember correctly, he was put back down there, but he had severe burns on his body where that required medical attention. Like, he ended up at a hospital and was treated for first or second degree burns. I don't think it was third degree, because he ended up making a full recovery supposedly. But I just really wish that I could have found that particular video so that I could have watched it and given you guys more details about it. I did try plugging that information, like what I knew, into AI. I tried to ask the Chat GPT about it, and it didn't come up with anything that quite resonated. It was like, well, here's a couple other things, but it's not what you're talking about. And maybe I was a little bit too vague, but these are just some of the things that happen, that I believe do happen. And I think that in a lot of cases, the people who are abducted are not brought back. And for whatever purpose, whether it be nefarious or otherwise, I think that it actually does happen. But in some cases, it does make me reluctant to believe everyone's story when they're like, oh, well, I felt all this love and warmth, and they let me know that I wasn't in pain and that I shouldn't be afraid and this and that, and you know what we do and this is how we do it. I don't know. It just, something seems unrealistic as far as like being absurdly calm, unless someone is drugged or under some kind of spell, hypnosis kind of thing, because people say that these that at least these particular grays are telepathic. They don't even really need to speak or engage. It's like they just look at you and you know what they're thinking and they know what you're thinking, supposedly. But, that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to start this channel, was just so that we could start trying to theorize more about it, because truth of the matter is we're never going to get actual real disclosure from the government. And honestly, I don't think that a lot of people can handle it. But like I said, I already know they exist, and if I know they exist, why wouldn't they come take some of us every once in a while for whatever they're experimenting on up there? And it would be like pulling a mouse out of a tank in a science lab, and then you're gone. So I think that there is some stuff to fear about it, but nothing to stop living your life over. And before I just get completely carried away, there is one thing that I did want to mention. Was there was it was probably 6-8 months ago, maybe a year ago. I was at a barber shop getting my hair cut, and I was talking to the young fella who was cutting my hair. He might have been 22, 23 years old, and he was cutting my hair. And I was just small talking with him, just chatting. And I asked him, like, where are you from? Or I can't remember if he volunteered the information or if I asked. But and he told me that he was from Roswell, New Mexico. I said, oh, really? How about that? Blah, blah, blah. But I didn't mention anything about UFOs or anything. But he volunteered the information, and he said, yeah, I remember growing up, I used to be so scared of aliens and stuff like that. Being from Roswell, it's a big thing out there. Like, there's all these storefronts and stuff, and like just people with their signs and stuff, take me to your leader kind of things. And he was like, yeah, I was always kind of scared when I was a kid, and I was like, they're real, and I didn't think that I was like unearthing some kind of like deep-seated trauma in this poor fella, but I was like, they're real, like I just said it so matter-of-factly, right? And he was like, what? As in, like, what do you mean? And I'm like, oh yeah, they exist. And he's like, come on. And I was like, I've seen them. And he said, you've seen aliens. And I said, well, I have seen what they fly around in. And like, it was almost like his heart dropped into his stomach or something. Like, no one had ever really told him in that kind of way, I guess, where it's like usually people come at it from an objective standpoint, and they're like, well, maybe, could be, possibly, might, but it's like no one ever told him yeah, dude, it's just the way it is. And after that, he really hurried to get me out of there, and he gave me a pretty lousy haircut. He was like, oh, okay. And he just got real quiet and just like kind of like swallowed real deep and was like, okay, have a nice day. And I gave him some money, and I got home because this was the first time I had actually paid for a haircut in many years, because my wife always cuts my hair, but she didn't have time to get around to me. She needs to cut it now. I mean, really, like, my hair hasn't been cut in quite a while. But anyway, I got home from that haircut, and my wife was like, oh my God, now I need to fix your haircut. And so I paid this guy like $40 to give me a lousy haircut because I scared him. So anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. But like I said, I would really like you guys to give me some of your experience, some of your accounts. Let me know what's going on. I have an email that I just started, but it's going through a verification process, so it's not ready yet. But that email is going to be called adpodcast at gmail.com. That's adpodcast@gmail.com. So if you guys would like to send me emails and stuff like that so that I can read it and I can relay what you said and we can talk about it on the next week's episode. So for those of you who made it this far, I would like to thank you for being here and seeing this through. And I hope to see you again either later on this week or next week whenever episode 3 comes out. So thank you very much and have yourselves a good rest of your day or night.